Hey peeps, welcome to another video. Today it is part 3 of the Vogue 9319 sew along, and today we are going to be starting the trousers and French seaming the inseam pockets. So let's get started. So next up we are going to start working on the trousers. So the first instruction is to fuse interfacing to wrong side of each matching fabric sections following manufacturer's instructions. So we need to fuse 2 of the front and 2 of the back yokes, and then leave the other 2 of each of those free. Now I haven't cut my interfacing out as yet, so I'm going to do that at a separate stage when I get to working with the yokes. The next thing to do is stitch dart in back, press fold of dart towards centre. So to mark my dart in, I've actually snipped into the seam allowance at the bottom legs of the dart. I have then put a pin through the point of the dart, and I'm going to use my friction pen to fold back. Doing this one-handed, fold back these 2 pieces so that I can find where the pin has gone through, mark in the point of my dart, and then I can join the point of the dart up the dart legs with my French curve once I have taken the pattern piece off. That's how I mark all of my darts. Okay, so the same thing with the darts. I have backstitched at the start and I have sewn off of the end at the point of the dart, so I now need to secure that, and I'm going to do that by tying a few knots and then trim off the excess. And then we want to press the darts in towards the centre. So I'm going to wait to press my darts until I have something more to do at the ironing board. So the next step is to stitch front to back together at the inner leg. So as you can imagine, I am going to French seam this, but it's the front to the back along the inner leg, so the bottom of the crotch curve. Right, so I've sewn the front to the back along the inseam leg. I've done it with the wrong sides together at 1/4 inch, and I'm now trimming off the excess so that I can start the French seam process. So once this is all trimmed, I'm going to then press it so the right sides are together and then sew at 3/8 inch. I've finished my French seam, so once I had trimmed off the excess, I then pressed it with the right sides together so that the seam was running along the very edge. I've then sewn at 3/8 inch, which is encased the raw edge, and created my French seam. Now with this one, you want to press one of them towards the back and one of them towards the front. When you put the crotch seams together, if you can then nest them so that there's not too much bulk in any one spot. So the next thing that it would like us to do is stitch crotch seam, leaving back free above large circles, stitch again 1/4 inch away inseam allowance, along curve as shown, trim close to second line of stitching. Okay, so I can't French seam this one because this from this spot upwards is where the zip's going to go, and you can't. I have used a French seam and chopped into it there, and then bound the edges of where the zip goes in, and I don't like how that finish turns out. So I'm actually going to use bias binding on the crotch seam to finish this raw edge. Again, you can overlock, you can zigzag stitch, you can double stitch like they say, and trim to the line of stitching, whichever is your preferred method, but for me I'm going to use bias binding. Okay, so to start sewing on my bias binding, I have sewn the right side of the binding to the wrong side of the fabric along the crotch seam, matching up the raw edges and stitching in the fold on the bias. So now what I need to do is fold everything to the right side, and again, doing this with one hand is not easy. Fold everything to the right side and then top stitch it down, and I like to do that with my blind hem foot. So I'm going to attach that, move my needle all the way over to the left, and run this edge, this guide on my foot along the edge of the binding when it's rolled over to the right side. Okay, so when I'm sewing the binding down, or top stitching the binding down from this edge, and I've got the camera as far back as I can get it. So I like to push the fabric down with my right hand and then push the binding down with my left as I sew. Kind of readjusting. Make sure that everything is lying flat, that you're not catching anything that you shouldn't be. Ideally, you want to be covering up this original line of stitching. And when you get to the curved bits, just take your time, readjust. Then this will need pressing, but that is your crotch seam finished with binding. So I'm going to do the same for the other side, press everything, and then we can sew them together. So once you've finished top stitching, you then want to go and give it a good press, and you should end up with something that looks like this. The next thing we want to do is sew our crotch seam together. Now I don't like the way that they suggest that you put the zip in. I'm just going to sew mine just past the inseam stitching here, so I'm going to stop mine quite a long way underneath where they suggest you stop it. And also I find, because I have a much smaller waist than I have hips, that if I use the zip length suggested in these kind of patterns, then I really struggle to get them on over my hips and still do up nicely at the waist. So I tend to use a longer zip than the pattern recommends, which is something that I would recommend you do if you do have the same sort of pear shape as I do in that general area. So I'm going to pin mine together, I'm going to nest my seams here, and then I'm going to backstitch and stop stitching around just past this intersection here. Okay, so I have sewn from the very top at the front, backstitched, sewn at 5/8 of an inch the whole way down. Now here, this is what I was talking about with one seam pressed to the back and then one seam pressed to the front. So they're nice and nested in there, and it means you get a nice join, and also that there is not too much bulk in this area. And then I have backstitched here, and I have left the very long back seam open because, as I mentioned, I don't like the way that they install zips or want me to install a zip on these trousers, and I also want to make a longer zip than the pattern recommends. Okay, so the next step is pockets and side seams. So it wants us to stitch one pocket section lining. I've cut mine out of the same fabric so I don't have a lining and a knot, to front of each side, taking up a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, press seam allowance towards pocket. Stitch one pocket section fabric to back, with at each side taking up a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, press seam allowance towards pocket. Guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to French seam mine. Now the other thing that we need to note is that there are actually circles here and here for pocket placement as well as this notch, but because I have lengthened this particular part of my trousers quite considerably, I'm going to just be matching up the notches, not worrying about the circles. So I'm going to French seam my pockets in, and I'm going to show you how I do that as we go. Okay, so if you were installing the pockets normally, you'd pin them with the right sides together, but as with French seams, you want to pin them with the wrong sides together. So I've done that for all 4 pocket pieces, and I have matched up the notch on all 4 pocket pieces. So first thing I'm going to do is sew this at 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to start at the edge of the pocket, backstitch, and sew all the way to the top of the pocket and backstitch. And this is the back pocket piece, and this is the bit that just has a little bit overlapping. The front one will line up completely at the top. So yes, going to stitch this at 1/4 of an inch. Once you've sewn your pockets in wrong sides together at 1/4 of an inch, you need to trim down the seam allowance, and I've trimmed mine to just under 1/8 of an inch. As you can see here, I've stopped the trimming at the bottom of the pocket, so this is the original seam line or seam allowance intact, and this is the pocket one. So I'm now going to go and press these so that the right sides are together. So press it So the right sides are together, and I end up with the stitching line that I've just made, that seam right on the crease of the press. And then we'll sew this again, and we'll sew it this time at another 1/4 of an inch, because we want our pockets to be slightly inset into the side seams of the trousers. Okay, so once you have pressed your seam, you should end up with the original seam on the very crease of the press, and then you're going to sew from the top of the pocket down to the bottom of the pocket at 1/4 of an inch, and that's going to have encased all the raw edges. And so you now want to go and press this with the seam into the pocket. So I'm going to press all of my pockets with the seam going into the pocket. Okay, so the next step is stitch front and back together at sides, leaving free between large circles. Stitch pocket edges together to side seams, clip back seam allowance below pockets. Right. So again, I'm going to French seam mine. So we want to pin ours together with the wrong sides together. So I'm going to do that. Okay, so the first step of this process is that you want to pin the wrong sides together. So I've got the wrong sides of the pockets and then the wrong sides of the trousers. And I've pinned from the top of the pocket all the way around to where it meets, and then down to the bottom of the trouser leg. And we want to sew this at 1/4 of an inch all the way around here, pivot here, and 1/4 of an inch all the way down here. Okay, same deal with all French seams. Once you have sewn them, you need to trim them in half. So trim up, this is the pivot point here, so trim up to that. You want to leave 1/8 of an inch both sides. So I'm now going to turn this so that the right sides are together, and I'm going to press all along those edges. Okay, so I have finished my French seams, and as you can see here, I have gone over, pivoted, and then sewn down at 3/8 of an inch there. Okay, so the next step is that we actually want to close up the opening of the pocket, because you don't want it to gape open. So this marking on the pattern piece is actually 2.5 inches down from the top. So for this one, I'm going to sew 3/8 of an inch away from this pressed edge here. So the edge, the seam of the pocket, I'm going to sew 3/8 of an inch into the trousers here and stitch this part up. And then the bottom one, because I've lengthened my crotch, the bottom marking is not in the right place. So I have marked up 1 inch from where this seam starts, and I'm going to sew from there, matching up this seam here, and that just makes the pocket opening form, and it also means that the pocket shouldn't gape open. That's the theory anyway. So I'm going to do that on both sides. Okay, so I have sewn up from the side seam of the trousers up to 1 inch into the pocket and back stitched. I've sewn from the top of the pattern, or the top of the seam, to 2.5 inches down and back stitched. And then the final thing that the pattern wants us to do is baste the top of the pocket into the center of the trousers, the front edge of the trousers. And it then also wants you to trim this particular part here, but I'm not going to. I'm going to press it towards the front of the trousers, and that way everything will sit nice and flatly. So I've basted my pockets in, and now I need to go and press everything. If you have any questions at all, please let me know in the comments section down below, and I will do my very best to answer them for you. I really hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you have, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't yet, please subscribe, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye!